Hello everyone and welcome to CMI Race, Building a Support Network. My name is Matt Jays and today we'll be joined by Priya Martin and Poonam Parmar, co-chairs of Mace's Ethnic Diversity Inclusion Network. And we'd like to start by wishing our Muslim members a joyful Eid, whether celebrating with your local communities or online here today with the wider CMI community. So thanks to everyone who sent their questions in advance. We'll be structuring our conversation around some of these, but if you do have questions throughout the conversation, then you can submit these using the chat function to the right of your screen, and we'll try and answer as many as we can. And to begin with, do let us know where you're joining from today. It'd be great to know whereabouts in the world our members are joining from. So today's session is being recorded and it will be shared with all those who book to attend. And the event recording will also be available on the CMI website and CMI YouTube channel. And if you are a member, please don't forget to log into Management Direct to record your attendance as part of your continuous professional development. So welcome, Poonam and Priya.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good
Hi,
afternoon.
Matt.
Good afternoon, both. So we've got a lot to cover in an hour, but obviously today we're going to be focusing on building support networks. So why don't we start with the kind of obvious question of why is building a support network important, do you think? So why don't we start with Priya on this one?
Yeah. Yes, so I think it comes down to why Poonam and I set up the network back in January of 2019. And there's a lot of different reasons. I think first and foremost is, we want to celebrate equality, diversity, and inclusion. And we feel that whatever protected characteristic you are, there should be no barriers to success and wanting to build on your career. Now, our company already had a LGBT plus network in place, but we do feel that there was perhaps a gap when it came to ethnicity and ethnic diversity within the construction industry. So we wanted people to feel like there's role models they could look up to, they could provide a kind of a support for each other, perhaps in terms of career development as well, to make sure that skills and talents are being recognized, and also just making sure that if there are any instances of discrimination, that is dealt with in a professional manner, and so that and it doesn't happen again. It's part of human nature that we do treat each other with respect and fairness. So again, lots of different reasons, and I think mainly is because we wanted to celebrate the ethnicities and cultures within our company and amongst our colleagues. And I think it started off with that kind of positive intent, and of course, when it does come to negative aspects such as discrimination, we want to sort of deal with it in that we're being respectful to people and we're making sure that the right message goes out. So I don't know if Poonam wants to add anything to that.
I think you explained that really, really well, Priya. Just to add to that, really, I think a network, as much as we support other employees within Mace, and we're kind of that go-to between leadership and the employees, I think also we form a support group with each other, so people know that there's other people who are experiencing the same things as them, if they are experiencing anything. And it's just a bit of comfort to be able to explain a situation and already have that understanding that someone else will understand what you're saying, because they have the same background. And sometimes it's quite hard to explain what you're going through, then have to explain to that person why it makes you feel a certain way. But when you're talking to people who come from the same background as you, it's already known. So I think that really, really helps. It helps people to open up a bit more, so we can actually delve into what are the issues, what are the barriers that are taking place within our company. Then we work with the leadership team and our allies and our network to try and overcome them. So yeah, it's been very successful so far, I think.
Wonderful, great introductions, and I can see that we've got people joining us from Glasgow right the way through to Loughborough, my hometown by incident. So okay, we've mentioned Mace. Why don't we perhaps just very quickly outline who Mace are, and then just go into a little bit more detail about how the network at Mace got started and to what extent it was driven by the organisation and by employees. So Poonam, would you like to kind of start us off on that one?
Yeah, so Mace is a global international construction company. I work within the consultancy side of the business as a planning manager, and Priya works as a project architect. And we both work for MOJ, Ministry of Justice. So that's quite interesting. So when we started the network 2019, like Priya said, there was a gap. We had LGBT, and within this time, we've also started, well, not us, but women at Mace have started up their own network as well. And there's parents at Mace, and I think it's really grown. These support networks are really helping, and I think it's quite obvious, and hence why it's a domino effect, and more people coming forward and saying, okay, what about this characteristic and this characteristic? And within leadership, there wasn't a push for an ethnic diverse network to come forward. Apparently there had been one, and it's all about momentum, really. And I think that momentum kind of died down. So Priya and I tried to start our own network again. And 2 years down the line, we have gained that momentum. And we'll go into that a bit further in the discussion. But we didn't get any push from leadership. However, we got a lot of support. So when we decided to go forward and start up the network, we wrote a business case, and straight away we had HR on board and saying, okay, we can help you check that, just ensure that it's in, we can really push for this network. And then we presented to the D&I steering committee, and they were very open to the Eden network. And then we got our group board sponsor, Jason Millett, quite early on as well. So there was a lot of engagement from senior leadership to have this network within Mace. And I think as time's gone on, it's just been stronger. More and more people are coming forward and saying, how can we support? How can we support? And now 2 years on, we have an established committee in North America, and we're now working towards having a committee in MENA and also Australia. So I think that's all down to leadership, and I can't stress how important it is to have leadership on your side.
Absolutely, and we're going to pick up on some of that. So yeah, I mean, Priya, I mean, that's a really interesting kind of introduction into what we're going to be talking about today in terms of the dynamics of employee-led networks and leadership sponsorship. I suppose, on a personal basis, what made you or what was your reasoning and rationale for wanting to start this all off?
Yeah, so I guess where I could really put my heart and mind into it is because, unfortunately, I myself had experienced racial discrimination within the construction industry. This was early on in my career. I definitely am not going through any of it now, touch wood. But it's something you don't forget very easily, and it can really have a jarring effect to the point where I almost gave up my career because of that, because of these hurtful comments that were made. Even if it was indirect, you just need to think twice about what you're saying, and that unconscious bias, I'm born and brought up in this country. I am definitely westernized, but I'm still proud of my skin color. I'm still proud of where I come from. So that, again, that happened sort of when I was just a new graduate, when I finished my undergraduate. And then I've been involved in diversity and inclusion for the past sort of 10 years. And it's something I will still continue in the years going forward, just because, I'm very much about, I want to include everybody. I know I don't want people to feel left out. And, for the people who've supported me in my career, I feel like there's others who are less lucky, and I want to be able to help to provide those opportunities for them as well. I like to give back. And so we, certainly Poonam and I feel like we have been giving back, even if we started off with just one person. Now with over 350 members in our network, I mean, that's saying something. It's showing that, even by sharing our personal stories and maybe sort of showing what we've achieved in our careers and our personal lives, that people are resonating with that. So I'm very open and honest about, my experiences that I come from. And then now it's just about, again, just continuing to get that message out there until it gets to the point where we don't need these networks anymore, where cultural change is just the norm. And we should, and in a year's time, we'd be able to see that progress rather than the same questions and the same gaps over and over again.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I know we're going to explore some of those in more detail, but it does lead us, quite neatly into the next question. Because obviously we received a huge amount of pre-submitted questions, and obviously we, encourage anyone here joining today to submit their questions in the comments as well, as we said. But I guess, you mentioned this a little bit earlier, and, it'd be interesting to find out a little bit more about the benefits of joining a network like Eden for people from diverse ethnic groups. I think you've touched upon a couple of areas already: building support, shared experiences, and overcoming barriers. I guess, from a career progression point of view as well. So how would you summarize and go into more detail on the benefits of joining a group like this? And so perhaps, Poonam, if I come to you on that one first.
I think the benefits is, one, I think speaking out and being able to put forward your opinions, because there's certain people who feel like they have been hindered in their progress within the company, and being able to voice that opinion, we can then dive into why, what do we need? And I think that's got a lot to do with training. I think ensuring that managers, senior managers have inclusive leadership training and understanding that everybody is different, and ensuring that they are catering for those differences as well. So I think it's hearing the stories, the experiences of our network, understanding what are their barriers, and then working with leadership to overcome them. Also within the network, I think speaking to other people, it's a network to help make change, but also it's a sort of like community. So if, for example, I've met so many different people within the network and I've made so many new friends, but also I've learned so much about different parts of the business. I've recently moved. I was in project controls previously, now into planning, but that shift and that move into planning came actually from Eden. I had spoken to people within Eden that I had been exposed to, and I used that network to actually progress my career and move into a different sector within the company. And I think that really helps. And I think also within Eden, we have people within the network from different levels within the company. So we have ops directors, we have business unit directors, we have managers, we have assistants, we have so many people across the board. And people are coming forward and are saying that we will help to mentor, for example, or we will, and I think it's a lot of like sponsorship. So it's like mentor over sponsorship. And I think within Eden, people are making those connections, and it's helping them move up in the business, and it's helping them get in that exposure across the business, and also just that that help from leadership and people higher up within the company to be able to cater to, say, if anyone has any questions, they're open to help them. So I think that's been a really, really good thing within the network, and it's really helped people who have joined within the network.
Thank you. Priya, anything to add?
Yeah, actually, Poonam already touched on it. I think the mentoring has been quite instrumental. And I just saw a comment about sort of collaboration with other networks, and that it ties in quite nicely with that. And I do want to touch on that, because with mentoring, I think it comes back to that thing about role models and having someone that you could relate to, perhaps from that protected characteristic. So at the moment, there's something that's being piloted in the company, reverse mentoring and reciprocal mentoring. And the networks have been involved in those discussions. So it's good that they're involving us and getting our opinions on, what are our members saying, what would they like to see from the mentoring, and we're really looking forward to sort of progressing that forward and getting that spread out to the rest of the business, because at the moment it's challenging when you've got a global company and you've got regional offices, and we don't want to be London centric. So we want to make sure that wherever you're working, you are entitled to have a mentor. I mean, I previously had a mentor from Dubai, and I got in touch with someone from Dubai, and we checked in on, let's say, a fortnightly, monthly basis, and even just to have that communication really kind of helped me to improve my soft skills, for example. So I think that's a very strong link, I think, with career progression.
Yeah, thanks ever so much. That's really, really helpful. And you're absolutely right. So we will go into collaborative working with other networks in a little more detail, and certainly in response to Ritu's comments earlier. So thanks ever so much for that, Ritu. So I guess we did have a question in advance also asking, as a white person, can I join a network like Eden? Now, obviously, we know that some networks are established exclusively for people from diverse ethnic groups, and others are open to all. And in your opinion, what are the pros and cons of each approach, and how did you reach your decision for Eden on this matter? And so if I start with Priya on this one this time.
Yeah, so I think the messaging was very clear from the beginning that you don't have to associate with that protected characteristics to be part of the network. We've got a disability network, LGBT plus, gender, etc., a military network as well. And what's happening now is this celebration of intersectionality. So there's lots of initiatives and messaging and events going around about how, it's likely that a lot of us would know someone who maybe identifies as one or more of those protected characteristics, or us ourselves identify as more than one. So that's been, opening up a lot more doors to different topics that maybe had not been previously explored. So I would say the pros are just that enrichedness that you get, that knowledge that you get across the board when it comes to protected characteristics. And cons, I mean, again, this is about inclusion. We don't want people to feel, I mean, there might be things that certain groups may not be able to relate to, but at least if they're listening and there's that kind of some sort of level of empathy, or maybe they can at least just spread the word to others if they can't themselves put themselves forward, but at least if they're able to pass it on to others and maybe see if others would be interested, that's helping us in a big way. So yeah, I don't really want to put cons on it. It's difficult. I don't know if Poonam would have anything to add to that.
Yes, so like Priya said, we made the conscious agreement that it would be open, and like all the other networks as well, it's open to everybody and anybody with LGBTQ plus. You don't have to identify as any, and you can still be part of it. Women at Mace still have men who attend. Parents at Mace, not necessarily full of parents. So I think it's more around like an educational piece. I think everyone is entitled to listen in and educate themselves on topics that they may not be exposed to within their friendship circle or in their working circle. And so Eden gives them that opportunity to join in, get that understanding, ask questions. It's a safe space. And I think recently we have had some feedback that not many people feel so comfortable asking questions about race. And that's something that Priya and I think about. How can we make it more open? How can we engage people from all backgrounds to really ask those questions? Because as long as it's no malice and no one's trying to be malicious in any sort of way, and it's just curiosity, then we're open to have that discussion. And also, I think it gives a different perspective. If we have people from ethnic backgrounds, not saying that everyone has the same experiences. However, I think somebody who isn't from an ethnic background and we're discussing something, we can get their perspective on it and have a bit more understanding as to how it can be perceived. And I think that really is quite a strong view. And I think it's quite nice to hear the other side of it. But also as allies, not in certain situations, especially ethnic minorities, if there isn't many of them within that project or in that team, and they're quite quiet or don't feel like they can stand up, having an ally or someone from a white background who sees where they've gone, where they might have seen some injustice, and they stand up for them, that gives them that sort of confidence, like, oh, he's standing up or she's standing up for me. And it gives them that confidence to then do it for themselves as well. And I think it's really powerful for everybody to stand together and just like zero tolerance, basically. And I think seeing it from especially leadership within companies. So right now we're trying to reduce that pay gap, that it's called the Bain report, but the ethnic pay gap report. And as we go up the ranks, we see across all the managers across the industry that it reduces as you go up. So for leadership not to stand up for you, it's just, I think it's a moral guidance. I think it should be something that should happen. In terms of cons, I don't think there's any cons. I feel like to a certain extent, we went on a site once and we had a conversation about race, and we had a mix of people from ethnic backgrounds, and then we had people from who were white as well. And we had this open conversation, and I think there was a bit of hesitation for the people from ethnic minorities to fully open up about any experiences. And maybe I got it wrong, but I was just reading from body language that it was a bit uncomfortable to be speaking about something openly. So again, that's something that we want to overcome and see how can we manage that open conversation where everyone can tell their truth.
Thanks so much, really comprehensive. And it kind of picks up on a question that we've had on the context in your particular sector of construction. So Dr. Ramgulam asks, what is your opinion regarding the rhetorics and realities regarding the implementation of D&I at work within the construction industry, especially when ethnic minority employees are concerned? So this also is reflected in our CMI race Moving the Dial progress report that we published, which does suggest that there is a rhetoric gap. So I guess, we've got a lot of other questions coming through as well, so I'll try and address some of those. But perhaps if either of you have a response to this question, it'd be great to hear it. I'll allow you to self-nominate on this one.
When you say rhetorics, apologies, and what do you mean? What do you mean by that?
So I believe, and again, you can let us know through your comments. But the rhetoric being what's said around the implementation of the network, and then the reality of actually how it is implemented. So I think that's the question that's being asked there.
Thank you for that clarification. Apologies. Yeah, I agree. I think there is a lot being done within the construction sector to improve D&I. I don't think we're quite there yet. We have a long way to go. And I think if you look at the ethnic minority pay gap, it's not that we're getting paid less than our white counterparts. We're just not at the levels of our white counterparts. If you, like I said before, as you go up the ranks, you just see a drastic decrease in the amount of ethnic diversity going up the ranks. And I think that is something that we are working really heavily on. And I think leadership are really getting involved in that, because really it's a top-down initiative, and it has to come from the top. And we've got that buy-in, and I am quite confident that it will go down. But it's quite difficult to make such a drastic change over a short period of time as well. I think the initiatives within D&I have become more front and center over the last couple of years, but it's not enough time to really make that change that we want to see. It will take some time. And I think making sure that your company has KPIs and holding a bit of accountability as well to ensure that those KPIs are hit. There's a lot of companies that go out there and put out all these statistics. Okay, we want to reach that, but then who is holding them to account about actually reaching those numbers and attaining those numbers? And I think within our company, the networks and HR, of course, but the networks as well sit alongside that. And we hold that accountability. We hold HR to that accountability. We speak to our leaderships, and we see, okay, how can we help to bring in more diverse talent? How do we retain the diverse talent that we already have? So, yeah, what is being said and the realities are not quite aligning at the moment, but I am quite confident that as we go forward, hopefully they should align. And yeah, I'm quite positive in that fact.
Wonderful. Thanks ever so much, and great question. Do keep them coming. So I guess, we talked about, or we look back at 2019 when you started the network. I guess, did you face any challenges in growing the network once it had been established? And if so, how did you overcome those challenges? And so Priya, perhaps starting with you on this one.
Yeah. So yes, it was just the two of us to start with. We then sort of, when we started putting together our business case and our pitch, we put together a steering committee, but perhaps in the beginning it wasn't as diverse as we wanted it to be, because it was sort of similar grades, similar races. I think it wasn't reflective of the whole business. But as time has gone on, we've had to learn a lot about ourselves and learn about what works and what doesn't, and how do we get our messaging out in the right way. So it's been a learning experience for us, as much as we're trying to obviously get others to be educated as well on and the awareness piece. I think to begin with, I think the big thing which has propelled momentum has been events. So in the beginning, when we had a launch event in 2019, The senior leadership, certainly our group board sponsor, had been promoting it. We have a very great marketing team, a fantastic marketing team who they really, I think when they do sort of put something out there, they put a lot of effort into it. So it's nice that we've always been getting some support from them. So I think we had sort of 100-person capacity. We got that 100-person capacity within that launch event. And it was something that people were talking about for weeks on end. And it's purely because of, again, us sort of speaking openly about our intentions and what we wanted to do. We had a guest speaker as well. And so with the events, it means that, people come and they bring, it brings people together, and then whatever topics are being discussed there, they take them to their teams. They take it to their teams and then they discuss it amongst their teams. Now, initially, maybe perhaps there's been dips where, the momentum again sort of wasn't growing, but where the momentum did grow then after, in between these events is senior leadership. So once you've got the senior leaders from those individual teams that are speaking to their teams about that, they then cascade up to people higher than them or even to each other. And then it means that, I guess I wouldn't call it jumping on the bandwagon, but then if other teams are thinking, oh, okay, so those groups are getting involved, maybe we should be doing the same. And again, it just starts that kind of domino effect. The last thing I'll just say is the challenge is between consultancy and construction. People who work in offices, I think at the moment there's a lot more buy-in with people who work within the consultancy side, but where you've got people on site is, I think, where growth still needs to be improved going forward. But given that, at least our company is able to cater for both, I'm hoping, and again, we're getting more and more senior people from the construction side who are spreading the message amongst their individual projects or sites. Again, and now that we have international presence too, I agree with Poonam that the conversation we're having now is very different to certainly from last year, and I'm hoping by next year or even in the next few months, even that it will be going on the rise.
Yeah, thanks so much. And we're approaching the halfway mark, if you can believe it. I mean, we've already covered a huge amount, and there's still a lot of questions and comments coming through. Ritu is actually asking, are Mace events open to the public? So perhaps, Poonam, if you want to answer that one.
Unfortunately not. They are they're only within the company at the moment, but I think it would be good to maybe host, because we do a lot of panel events which are really, really informative. They're one of my favorite events that we put on, and I think it would be quite beneficial to open it up, but that's something we can discuss with Mace events and maybe get back to you guys.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, isn't it, this idea of as you say, creating safe spaces for employees, but also wanting to widen the conversation more broadly as well. So there's always a dynamic there, isn't there? And it perhaps leads us really neatly into the next question. So you talked about looking back on the past year, obviously within the context of the global pandemic. How did going digital impact on the work and activities of your network, the events that you mentioned, and what impact might that have on your work going forward? So Poonam, do you want to come in on that one first?
So for me, I thought that the pandemic was really hard, but in terms of the way we moved into a digital space, it's just changed the game in which we operate. We have seen an influx of people joining the network. I think we've had the most people join over the last year than we have since we started. And it's just going up at an exponential rate. And I think that's got a lot to do with going digital, because trying to get people in a room physically, because that's just what we're used to. We're like, okay, we have a meeting, people come together, etc. But having that option to join digitally, it includes everybody. And I think that's the reason why we reached out to an international audience. And that is why I believe there is a steering committee in North America, because they were able to engage with us. We actually started from, we had a safe space series called Loud and Clear, where people spoke about their experiences, and it was a conversation between employees of Mace and the leadership, and we took actions from that conversation, and then we implemented them. But that wouldn't have been possible if we didn't go digital, and it allows people from different places, different parts of the business, different countries to come together and voice their opinions and give their different experiences. And I think that's been extreme, especially as being Eden, an ethnic diverse inclusion network. We want different opinions from different people rather than just having the same. From the UK, we have our issues, but that's not the same as people in North America, what they undergo. It's not the same as people in India. It's not the same as people in Pakistan. And I think it really varies. And I think the digital transformation has really excelled within the Eden network. And yeah, I think going forward, we're always going to have that option to join via a digital mean, even if we are going to host a physical event.
Great, thanks ever so much. There's a really lively chat going on in comments, so I do want to make sure that we leave enough time to make sure we can kind of go into some of the topics being discussed, but do keep that going on the chat. It's really interesting to see alongside the conversation that's happening, obviously with the panel. So we talked about senior leader sponsorship and the importance of that for the network. But I guess, very specifically, what does sponsorship look like? What does good sponsorship look like in practice? And Priya, shall I come to you on that one first?
Yeah, so I guess there's two things that come to mind. There's of course financial sponsorship, but then there's also I wouldn't say emotional, but it's still that kind of being present and being active and being aware of what we're doing and being supportive of what we're doing. So with regards to financial sponsorship, I mean, the cases where we might have needed it is if we were to exchange with external providers, if we were to collaborate with any external organizations to push what we're doing. And again, those would require obviously a business case to do so. But then we found that, we did have internal resourcing to be able to do those things anyway. But it might be that in the future that, in order for us to grow, because I think, we talked about events before. I'm certainly keen that we don't want to be too internalized. It's something that if we're going to make an impact in the industry and we want to display Mace as exemplar in promoting diversity and inclusion, that external collaboration is important. So that's examples where I think finance would come in handy. We understand that people who do panel events or speaking, people do that as part of their job. And so if you've got a really influential speaker who can really impact an audience and really get that message out there, we understand that they deserve to be paid. Obviously, we're doing this from the goodness of our hearts, so because it's something that we're passionate about. But there's sort of examples that just come to mind, and anybody else who's thinking of setting up a network, you will come across those hurdles. But we're quite lucky in that because we've had multiple networks within the organization, each network now has an allocated pot of finance to be able to use as they so wish. And so it's not something we would spend willy-nilly. We will be strategic about how that is spent. And that's nice that the business has recognized that. And then, of course, with emotional or sponsorship is to do with, the fact that our group board sponsor has spoken about us as part of big meetings and training sessions that he's hosted. Other senior leaders are including even just 5-minute presentations as part of their comms meetings with their teams. We have inclusion moments. So it's like health, safety, and well-being moments where at the start of each meeting you would maybe give some facts or some advice, or likewise you put an inclusion moment in there, and it becomes again cascaded from top down. So and even now with appraisals now, are you including an objective to do with diversity and inclusion? And again, that's all part of people maybe even again emotionally sponsoring people to excel in their career. So that becomes part of your career, that you just become an inclusive leader. That's great. So again, I appreciate I've gone quite broad with it, but I think for us, because everything has been very positive for us, we feel we've been sponsored in a great way, and that's why the network is where it is today.
That's great, really, really great to hear. And I think there's a really interesting chat going on in the comments around line management and the role and duty of managers. Obviously, we are a Chartered Management Institute, so it's a key topic for us to cover off. And in moving the dial on race, we say that managers can proactively provide support or specific support for people to develop larger, more diverse networks. And we list some examples of simple but effective ways to do this. So how do you think managers can best engage with networks to achieve this? And do you have any practical examples you could share for other line managers watching today? And Poonam, should I come to you on that one first this time?
Yes, so I think when it comes to line management, at the end of the day, regardless, if you're a manager, it's people. Like, even though you're in a work setting, you're still working with people. And I think it's just understanding that concept that everybody is different. When you go outside, you don't assume everyone is the same. So it's exactly the same in a working environment. You take that time to understand the people who work with you and what their needs are. And I think you can get that through regular catch-ups, just finding out, building trust. I think trust is actually where the most important thing, building that trust with the people you work with, so that they know that they can come to you if there is an issue. Because I think we have anonymous forums to, if you have an incident you want to report, you can have an anonymous system. And the reason why it's anonymous is because people feel like there might be some backlash or something like that. But being able to have somebody like your line manager that you have built that connection with, and you will know that if there was anything that was to go wrong or something that made you feel uncomfortable, that is the person you can speak to. And obviously there's a line between professionalism and becoming friends. Like, that's up to you. But just establishing that trust, that regardless of what your background is, ethnicity, I'm here for you if you need to speak to me about anything. And I don't think there's much out there, apart from we can do inclusive leadership training, just joining networks, understanding more about the different backgrounds of different employees, because just understanding a bit more about their background, you could actually find out a lot about that person, certain things, why they don't want to do certain things, or why this wouldn't work for them, or etc. Like, it's up to you, if you want to be a good manager, is to take that step and really understand the people you're working with. So I think, besides from training, it's establishing trust.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a key finding in our Management Transformed research as well that we published last year. So highly recommend anyone watching who hasn't yet looked at that to take a look. It's got some really interesting and worrying findings in there around trust. So Priya, yeah, anything to add on that? Tips for line managers in order to support the work of your network? How would you like to see managers get more involved?
Yeah, I don't have much to add other than, again, it's just, if you were to have those kind of one-to-one meetings with managers, just making them aware that you're even part of the network. And, just even at the start of those one-to-one meetings, again, having just a kind of like a brief inclusion moment, just talking about something that's current, that is happening. For example, you mentioned Eid, thank you for mentioning that, just having that, awareness that, this is my background and this is where I come from, and this is what I've been celebrating this weekend, or this is what my family do at this point. And even when managers ask, how was your weekend, what did you do, I think, and if there's something that's cultural and if you want to mention it, then there shouldn't be any bias about that. Again, it just enriches that experience and what that manager can know about that person. And it brings back to kind of the business benefits of having a diverse team, is that you bring those perspectives and those skills in there, which they might have learned. If you have somebody from international and they did that back in their home country and they're able to bring that and implement that in the UK, then great. It's something that can really help in terms of work. So yeah, that was all I kind of wanted to add.
Sorry, I just have something to quickly add. I just saw in the comments, Dr. Mahendra Kumar said transparency and fairness in decision making, and I think that's really, really, really important. Transparency, because we have something called behaviors for success, and it's different criteria, and it shows you how you can work your way up within the business. And I think that really helps, because you have an understanding between yourself and your line manager how you can progress, and it's not based on any of your protected characteristics. It's solely based on your behaviors and how you perform at work. And I think having something like that, which is directly linked to your appraisal, which is then linked to your pay rise, etc. And I think having that really makes a difference, that transparency, that understanding. This is what I need to do, tick spot exercise. I have done this, this, and this. Therefore, this is my argument for why I think I deserve a pay rise, blah, blah. And I think transparency is key for fairness.
Yeah, thanks ever so much. Thanks for picking up on that comment. That's fantastic, and do keep them coming. We're kind of approaching 3/4 stage of this conversation, so Still, lots of time to have questions and comments in the chat there. So I guess, let's pick up a little bit on that point that you've just made there around transparency. And obviously you've mentioned previously about ethnicity pay reporting and the importance of ethnicity pay reporting, and the fact that, the analysis of that and the development of action plans can really help with addressing issues of underrepresentation of specific ethnic groups in the organization. So on that basis, we know that one of the biggest challenges we face is that diverse ethnic groups are underrepresented in management and leadership roles across the UK, and some significantly more so than others. And so how do you ensure your network addresses the specific needs of different ethnic groups? And could you give any practical examples and tips for this? So Priya, shall I come to you on that one first?
Yeah. So just from my understanding, so it's how to address those different ethnic groups, just kind of bringing the awareness piece to it.
Yeah, so I think, in our last webinar, we talked about terminology and we talked about getting as specific as possible. And so obviously,
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things we've been doing is we call them beverage breaks. We put a bit of a funky name to them. we didn't quite say tea or coffee because not everyone might drink tea or coffee. So that's been actually quite instrumental for us, certainly in terms of momentum and gaining more members. And again, people then recommend them to their team members. So it happens at the moment, it's happening every fortnight. And we do encourage network members to come forward and perhaps discuss a topic. Sometimes they do a PowerPoint presentation, sometimes it's an informal discussion. There's been topics around maybe mental health and the taboo around mental health in certain ethnic communities. People have talked about what Ramadan means to them. People talk about, again, other kind of holidays. We also have a social media platform, an internal social media platform called Yammer. And if there's a specific celebration day or awareness day, people post pictures of, again, and it comes back to, again, some of my previous points that I made. And that's quite nice because with those beverage breaks, people can just take a break from work and again, get to learn something about other people from across the business. Sometimes these beverage breaks, we have people from the recruitment team who might come along and talk about what they're doing in terms of improving recruitment, in terms of, ethnicity, etc. So, and also it comes down to events as well. So we do plan a sort of events calendar at the start of the year. We try and look at, where could we collaborate with the other networks, for example, so that it doesn't kind of double up. We did something maybe around International Women's Day. We're doing something around Pride Month, and then of course there's Black History Month. And usually around the autumn time, I think actually recently there was quite a lot of South Asian events that happened all in the same week. So there was awareness around that. So it's identifying maybe the points in the year, and we would also encourage. Thing is, we can't know all about all cultures and all backgrounds and what are the different awareness days and celebration days. So now as more and more members sort of come forward and be able to promote that themselves and have a voice to be able to promote that themselves, then there'll be other employees who can relate to that. And then, it sort of, I guess it means that it does become a collaborative network rather than sort of the onus is then on us to kind of know exactly, what other events or again, other practices that people want to share.
Thanks ever so much. And we did say right at the front that we would move into that kind of collaboration piece and the intersectionality of different characteristics. And we've got comments coming through on that now. So we actually feature a case study on Mace in Moving the Dial on Race, and it says, it is also important to ensure that all protected characteristics are given equal importance and support, despite the barriers and issues affecting individuals being different. Cross-collaboration and intersectionality are areas we're looking to focus on. So how do you go about this in practice, this collaboration and looking at intersectional matters? Poonam, should I come to you on that one first?
Yes, so I think events, talking about the crossovers. So for example, we recently had a panel event which was part of Pride and the military. We have a military network as well, and it was talking about people who have been part of the military network, who will be part of the army and were also gay, and that sort of transition and that progression over time, because not too long ago, you weren't allowed to be in the army or the navy if you were gay. And it's that feeling and understanding of how did that make people feel to have to hide such a big part of them. And again, it's just understanding empathy listening to stories, listening to people's experiences, and seeing what lies between it. But also, I think that's one side, to gain empathy and to understand people's experiences within the employees. But to actually make change, I think we also need to look at the figures and statistics and understand, where are we lacking? What can we do? And within Mace, there has been quite a big campaign within the D&I strategy to ensure that we're filling out our Oracle data. And if you would like to, of course. And we've put that out there because then we can see where we need to work, what we need to work on, how we can work on that. And I think definitely looking at the statistics and the numbers will be the thing that can help you the most. Because as employees, even if we're more understanding, it's really, again, top down. We have to make sure that the change is coming from the top. And we want to be putting people in positions of leadership so that when the younger generation come in, they can see people who look just like them and say, do you know what, I can be that person. Otherwise, you have a retention problem and people are going to slowly drop off because they don't feel like they don't see any visuals of how they can get to that position. So I think that's really, really important. And intersectionality, as I'm a female, but I'm also an Asian female, and I join, I'm part of Women at Mace, and I like to get involved in their discussions because it's directly related to myself. And you can see where things may differ, but also the similarities between women and then also ethnic minorities. So it's just having those conversations and then going through the data step by step and just implementing. It's a slow process at the end of the day, and we're not going to be able to make those changes overnight. But as long as we're working together to get those changes or actions embedded, I think that's where it's probably best to get started.
Yeah, absolutely. And as our chief exec says, you know, what gets measured gets managed, and what gets managed gets done, which I think is a great kind of point on that one. And I think it goes back to a comment by Ritu earlier about, you know, the importance of keeping going, measuring progress, and continuing to engage leadership and staff at all levels to move them towards solutions and aligning with them. So I think that really speaks to that point. We are approaching kind of the tail end of this conversation. There's still lots to cover. I think, you know, one of the things that we have touched upon really is around the idea that, you know, obviously you are very passionate and that you run these networks as I think earlier, labor of love, you might have said, Priya. I'm not sure if I'm quoting you directly on that one. But I guess, you know, kind of finding the right balance can be difficult, particularly with, you know, for staff with already large workloads. And I know before we even started this call, we were talking about how busy we were today. So thanks again for joining. But I guess kind of, you know, what support do network leaders need from either others across the organization and the key resources organizations can provide for you as leaders of these networks to establish and nurture this support network as you are doing. So just perhaps some brief thoughts on that. And I know we've discussed this a little bit already, but Priya, perhaps just to summarize.
Yeah, so I think certainly in terms of network leads, I think having that sort of governance in place is very important. So we do have regular catch-ups with the other network chairs and also our D&I manager. And I think it's good that we're able to then hear from our D&I manager what is actually happening in terms of the wider business, just so we don't sort of double up in terms of our actions and our remits as well. You know, there's things like recruitment and things like that, which HR would be better equipped to do because, of course, we've got day jobs. You know, we can't cover everything on the diversity inclusion strategy, but there's certain things that we can certainly do, particularly around, say, people and culture, and that we can certainly implement. And of course, you know, if there's any requests from us, then we know and then we sort of then report back on our progress. And I think right now, what's been good is that we do on sort of a bi-monthly basis is record our progress and be able to feed that up. And if there are gaps, if we don't know who to go to in the business for support on a certain action or a certain initiative that we're looking to do, then that's where we will ask the question. And I think it's also a case of, because we've got these other networks as well, having these meetings and having these discussions with our D&I manager means that we're all trying to be as joined up as possible. So trying to make sure that if there's an overlap, if there's things that we're doing that's similar. It doesn't have to distinguish between protected characteristics. It's something that will affect everyone. So for example, mentoring is something that would be quite universal across everybody. So we would just make sure that we just have that open communication with the other network chairs. And I think in terms of obviously time and resource, when it comes to our steering committee and people who join, they're giving up their time, they're volunteering their time, and we are absolutely grateful for our committees, and I'm sure the other committees for the other networks, on the time that they give up. But of course, we're human beings, and again, we've got day jobs. I'm an architect, Poonam works in planning, and if there's a point where someone wants to pass on the baton to someone else, that's absolutely fine. And if they've made a contribution, and I can certainly walk away feeling I've made a contribution, then and if you give somebody else that platform, so I am actually stepping down at the end of June, and I've got a successor, and if it means that person has that chance of leadership, that chance of networking, as Poonam mentioned, this opportunity to meet people across the business, I can certainly still walk away feeling like I can still maintain some of those connections, and I'll still, put my name out there. And I think other people from the committee are certainly going to be able to do that as well. And again, because it's good to have a good number of people on the committee as well, because then the workload can be shared, and what's reasonable, in between the time that you're working in a day job. And I've always said your day job does take priority, but of course, just say something if you can't. And I think having that support from senior, from having the support from our D&I manager, to recognize the efforts that we are doing on top of our day jobs, I think is important. And I think there's still sort of ongoing talks about how can we manage that resource, and again, what's within our remit, so then we don't feel like we're wasting time with certain actions. So yeah, that kind of sums that up.
Absolutely, thanks so much. And I'm looking at the clock, and I'm thinking I'm going to try and be ambitious and squeeze in, kind of three more questions, if at all possible. We've still got questions and comments coming through as well, so that's fantastic to see. This is perhaps kind of related. So, what is the size of your community? I think you mentioned earlier there was around 350. Is that correct? Yeah, and in terms of structuring the roles, so could you tell us a little bit about that in practice? So obviously your co-chairs, do you have other members of the community doing specific lines of action? How's that look?
So the structure is, so we have a P&T board at the top, and then coming down, we have the different networks, which is like an umbrella of the different networks. And then we have the chairs. So Priya and I are the co-chairs. And then we have a steering committee of about 12 people. And that has changed over time. People have come and people have shown interest, and we've swapped them out. But we have 12 people, and we've now aligned our objectives with the D&I strategy. We've broken them down into the 6 pillars, and we put our objectives within those 6 pillars, and we have leads on each one, and they work within the organizations to progress those objectives. And then every month we have a steering committee meeting where we update each other. We need any help, or we need to progress anything. We use that time to do that. But other than that, that is the overall structure, and that's worked really well for us.
Fantastic, and great answer to that questions, and we've got others coming through, as I say. So you mentioned earlier, so clear governance and remits of HR, employee networks, and other key functions, such as recruitment and retention, currently continuously improved on. So we know how important that is, but for perhaps some people on the call, it might sound easier said than done. So, what would be your top tips for really, if someone who's out there now who thinks, right, I'm going to take the leap and develop my business plan to start a network, what would be the top tips for how to go about building that engagement with the key areas? Very succinctly, because I know we've kind of covered this already, but just top tips, if that's okay. So, Priya, shall I come to you on that one?
Yeah. So I think right at the very beginning, be very clear what you'd like to achieve with this network. Be very clear about the fact that, you want to make it inclusive to everybody, but then it's also raising awareness of certain issues. And so I think, again, it's something we've evolved over time, but I think it's just being very specific about what are your key objectives that you want to achieve. So having a kind of a mission statement, and then, or your vision, your mission statement, and then maybe sort of, I'd say maybe up to 4 or 5 key objectives that you'd like to, and that would also then influence perhaps your plan for the year, and maybe sort of planning it on a yearly basis and looking at how does the year look like, and certain things could be something that's ongoing, and then certain things would be achieved sooner. So once you've kind of got all that in place, and also looking at what are the benefits, what are going to be the benefits to your business, what are going to be the benefits to your people in retaining your people, providing that support for your people, how will it impact, especially now that bids, if you're winning work, for example, in the construction industry, people are asking for evidence of what are you doing about diversity and inclusion. So if you're going to win new clients, so you need to look at, right, if we set up this network and we provide this support and we're able to retain this staff, and these are what we're going to achieve, this will lead to winning more work, putting our company in this stance in a public space. And once you've got all that in sort of a 1 or 2 pager, go to the right person in the business who can help to sort of cascade that up to either HR or to your directors. And then once you've got the green light, you just need a good team of people to just get it going.
Fantastic. Thanks ever so much. And there's some, obviously a huge evidence base out there to support that. So everything from, McKinsey do fantastic research in this area. We know the business case for diversity and inclusion right the way throughout an organization. And obviously CMI has published many reports on this. So, lots of evidence to draw from there for that work that you're talking about. So it does draw us towards the end. And, thanks ever so much to everyone for all the pre-submitted questions, which we've tried to use throughout our conversation. But obviously a huge amount more came through in the comments as well. And we'll be taking a look at those shortly, to really get a better understanding of some further questions and further conversations we might want to have. But the next event will actually, for CMI Race, be on allyship, and we'll be joined by Shelter's allyship affinity group to talk about allyship. So Priya, Poonam, while I've got you in the last 2 minutes, so perhaps a minute each tops, what does effective allyship look like in your opinion? So Poonam, very briefly, what does effective allyship look like to you?
Involvement, get involved, show your face, show that you are involved, show that enthusiasm. In genuine empathy, genuine engagement is really important. It has to be organic. And I think if allies are showing their interest, it kind of trickles down, and the people they're around, it kind of engages them as well. So I think that's really important. Stand up. If you see something, stand up, say it. Speak out when you need to, set that standard for the others around you. I think that's really, really important. And just be open to listening and understanding other people, understanding people being the main point.
Fantastic. Priya, anything to add on effective allyship to close?
I think Poonam summed up a lot of it. But I would say to add, don't be a bystander. Even if it doesn't affect you directly, be able to speak out for others. Don't be afraid to ask questions. If there's something you don't understand, feel free to ask the questions, educate yourself, and do what's within your capacity. Any small contribution, or even just passing it on to someone else, even if you can't actively be involved, is a huge help in itself. So whatever contribution you make will be appreciated, and it's all about strength in numbers. So the more people who get involved, and however big or small, the better, and it will set an example, and I think people will follow.
Absolutely. I think that's such a good way to summarize and close this conversation. We've covered a huge amount of topics, but I think that's a great way to close. So that is it for today's session. Thanks ever so much for everyone who joined us, and thank you to Priya and Poonam for your insights and expertise. And if you are interested in finding out more about CMI Race, we have shared some links in the chat throughout this conversation. And obviously, if you're not yet a member of CMI, you can join our community or sign up for our free newsletter and find out more information and how to get involved with CMI Race activities going forward. So it just leaves me to say thank you ever so much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining.